All right. I clicked about 2 minutes early because I never know if my internet's going to be fast enough or if there's going to be glitches or anything, or if the sound isn't working. So if you come in and you see this, let me know if you can hear me and what the audio and video is like. We're going to talk about some stuff today. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about, but I got a few things I want to talk about. But get on there and tell me if you can hear me and if the video is all right. I usually have to do this maybe 2-3 times because, you know, I'm a primitive kind of guy, and you never know if the technology, you might be able to hear the generator going. By the way, everything is inverted. Don't know why they do that. Facebook does that, but I guess it's got to be like you're looking in a mirror. It's the opposite of a mirror. It's the opposite of a mirror. This is my right hand. I don't understand. All right, so if you're out there, let me know. Say hi. Let me know how the video and the audio is. A couple of things I want to talk about, then we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you have any topics or things you want to think about, you can type them in. You know, oh, okay, it's good. So, you know, I try to keep up a little bit with the culture, not because I enjoy it, because quite often I don't, but just so I can talk to people in terms that they understand. It also helps me understand kind of the philosophies and concepts and ideas that are working their way through the culture as a preacher and all the other things I do. It certainly helps for me to understand kind of the zeitgeist and what's going on. So I've been watching this show. I think they just started the second season. I'm going to try not to do any spoilers, but it just really doesn't matter because it's not that great a show. But it's a show called Tin Man. And it's got Tim Roth and a bunch of other people you would recognize. Basically, the gist of it is that, and you don't really know, they don't give you a whole lot of answers to what's going on. It's kind of like Longmire. So he's a cop up in the wilds of Canada. He comes from Liverpool, England, and he's got this sketchy background, and there's these people trying to kill him in the first season. And I'm going to get to the Brother Frankenstein question. Remind me if I forget. So anyways, it's kind of a very, very dark Longmire cop show, except it goes way off the rails real early in the first season. These people are trying to kill him, and then he's got this alternate personality where when he drinks and gets drunk, he becomes this guy named Jack, who's a psychopath killer who will do anything to protect his family. And so then the whole second half of the first season is just him tracking down people and killing people. 10 star. Now what I said? 10 star, yeah. I think that's what I said. Anyways, 10 star, yeah, with Tim Roth. So it was interesting enough in the first season that I decided to, they just started the second season. I decided to watch it. And it is a dumpster fire of bigotry and stupid writing in the second season. So I was going to talk about that a little bit because whether you're, you know, and we can take this in whatever direction you want to take it. We can talk about the theological or philosophical ideas in it, or we can talk about the writing, bad writing and what bad writing is. So in the second season, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, but I'm really not. In the second season, it starts off 10 hours after the first season, and you think he's dead, and you don't know if he got shot or whatever. His daughter runs to a plain community in Canada. And they call them the Ammonites, but it's basically a plain, somewhat liberal because they've got cars and generate phones and whatnot. I said 10 man. I meant 10 star. Yeah. And so she runs to this community. She hides out in the barn, tries to hang herself. Long story short, they bring her in. And then inevitably what happens, because you're not allowed to negatively portray the Muslim religion, Catholics, Mormons, Jews, none of those. You can't really negatively portray any of those. You can still have a show where you negatively portray plain people, and no one's going to say anything because, first of all, those people are probably not watching it. And even if they are not offended. They don't get offended. And I'm not offended either. I'm just pointing out something that illustrates very bad writing. And so, most people, especially those people from Hollywood and all that, they're very bigoted against plain people. So they start off with the assumption that all of these are wicked patriarchal monsters who have taken their families into the wilderness to start a colony so that they can abuse and manipulate the women and live in this ultra mean, wicked way where women are just treated poorly. And so of course that's what the writers start off with. And the second thing is because they must make this more than that. In every one of these shows, one or more of the leaders of the group are pedophiles, even though these things as a whole don't exist in the plain community other than in like so rare occasions for their numbers. They portray somebody's into drugs, somebody's a rapist, somebody, there's always some really, really dark secret, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows everybody there is just wicked, and all the women and the children are just the victims of this patriarchal. And that's, of course, the thought that went behind the writing here. And it's just lazy writing, but you can get away with it because you're talking about plain people. And so, in the story, of course, this the pastor of the church is a drug dealer, and he was forced for reasons beyond his control to start smuggling in cocaine all the way from Mexico, and then it builds up to this big emotional showdown as the narco terrorists, the cartels, are coming to kill everybody. Instead of like fleeing and saying we can deal with the emotional stuff later, they all have to sit at the kitchen table, and there's a whole episode of them recriminations for the wickedness of plain people. And of course Tim Roth, who's the hero of the show, who's a psychopathic murderer with zero conscience, who kills without any compunction whatsoever, an alcoholic thief who steals trucks and cars and beats people and stabs women, is the moral judge sitting in judgment on this. He walks through the house and he's making sarcastic comments about how plain and scary these people are. And it's just bad writing. There's bad writing on so many levels. First of all, to write a scene where no matter what emotional baggage is going on in your family or whatever, when the narco terrorists are coming to kill you, you don't sit at the kitchen table for the whole episode and wait and argue. You just don't do that. Based on a true story, not any that I know, but it's like nobody watching the show is sitting there going, "Gosh, I hope this familial problem gets solved." Every single person watching the show is like, "Get out of there. What are you doing, you idiots? Why are you sitting there having this conversation while the cartels are coming to kill you?" And then that doesn't even work out. It's just the thing is a dumpster fire of disaster, right? But it is laid atop some of the most fantastic cinematography, and the directing of the visual directing is fabulous. The story is completely incomprehensible. And they have things happen like one of the characters needs money, so she just knows where this drug dealing pastor hides his drugs. They never explain how she knows where the drugs, because they showed up in this season. He comes in the first episode. He comes from Mexico and he's got the drugs. He gets them out of the car and he hides them in the well, cistern, whatever it is. She needs money. She's completely unconnected to this plain community. She just goes to the well and gets the drugs out. They never even explain why Yeah, you're right, Artie. It is very pretty much Ozark, but Ozark is just better written still. It's still better written than this. This is just a disaster. And Ozark did have the weird country neighbors who were murderers, but then they still were like sitting in judgment on everybody else. There's some weird stuff going on in Ozark, but Ozark doesn't go off the rails quite as bad. And so we could talk about that as far as the writing, putting together a story where the elements of the story, there are just weird things that happen in this story. That the body count for 2 seasons is probably like 20 dead people, and there's no like recriminations. The cops are just like, I don't know what to do. We can't stop him. They've got him in jail, and he's like, yeah, he's committed 4 or 5 murders, and they're like, hello, Pat. They're like, he's like, yeah, I'll go to AA meeting if you let me out. They're like, okay, but you got to go to AA and be a good boy. So then he goes to the AA meeting, and the cop is like in the meeting, and he's like, for us to talk freely, the police officer should have to leave. And she leaves, and then he goes out the back door. Just weak writing. All right, thank you for reminding me. Yes, Brother Frankenstein. In fact, I've been talking about this week. There is going to be a second book. When it was originally written, there was a concept for a second book, but I have since developed a very good storyline. And part of me going to New Orleans a couple of months ago, 5 or 6 months ago, was to take notes for a second Frankenstein book. So yes, there's going to be a second Frankenstein. Hello, San Rico. We got people from all over. If you're here, say hi. If there's something you want to talk about other than what I'm talking about, which is, first of all, this kind of insipid bigotry where you can pick the most meek and humble group that's not going to protest because they're not easily offended, and you can portray them however you want in movies and TV shows, and that's fine. Even the so-called liberal protectors, the social justice people who would be up in arms if you portrayed any other religion that way, they don't care. Because they hate the idea, what they've been told about plain people and patriarchy. So you can portray Amish, Mennonites, whatever, any way you want to, and it's always negative. There's almost, if you go back to Witness, which was 1985, I think, it was kind of a mixed bag. Most of the Amish was portrayed pretty well, but yeah, I don't know, Gerald, what that is. I don't really have time to click on it and go look at it. There are in the story, they call them Ammonites, but there are Mennonites that are about 8 hours from here in Mexico, northern Mexico. That's kind of where but it's so loosely based on anything that I wouldn't even draw a connection. It's just bad writing. Yeah, they just took some gist of a story and then took their own kind of bigoted ideas of what a ugly patriarchal country agrarian colony would be like, and then just everybody there just doesn't really believe. That's kind of an old trope. That's an old trope in portraying religious people in Hollywood and TV shows, is that you portray them as people that are faking it for power or whatever. Now we have real examples of that in religious groups where horrible things are going on and being documented, not as a rarity or as a something that happens in human communities in even greater percentage of the population, but that are happening like because of that system. But that's kind of an old trope. There's an old trope in Hollywood where you take the idea that everybody who becomes a person of faith, in other words, that where their faith actually directs their behavior and their thoughts and their ideas and all of those things, and since the person writing it doesn't believe it, then they project that unbelief on that person. So now you have an edge where you can go, okay, since they're obviously lying, then I can add on all of these other negative attributes, and everybody will buy it because these people have to be. There's no one that could possibly truly believe that. So it's an ugliness and all of that kind of stuff, but it was kind of interesting. Hey, so if there's anything y'all want to talk about, topics you want to talk about, let me know. I'm just kind of sitting here. There was that. So 10 Star was the show. Was there anything else about that show that, like I said, the cinematography, the visuals are pretty stunning and pretty. I mean, just even the decisions on the angles where they would shoot the hand on a gun or something like that. There was enough oddities in it that it held interest. It's like all of a sudden there's this group never explained, but there's this group of these Amish girls or Ammonite girls randomly shooting people because it's fun. I thought that was kind of a neat, and that probably came from a true story. I would think somebody probably read that somewhere and decided to introduce that into the story. So there was some kind of neat decisions, but some of it was just so bad. The whole police procedure, nobody ever like gets caught for anything. People are just like disposing of bodies in ways that they would be easily found. Bodies don't decay really unless they really need them to for the show, for the smell or whatever. There's just really senseless and needless violence where you can understand that that's part of the genre, but then it doesn't actually add to the story, other than to show, I guess, that this character is a completely sociopathic or psychopathic. I'm getting messages for some reason. Anyways, anything y'all want to talk about, we can talk about that right now. I got a lot of stuff going on. I got books. I'm surrounded by books because I'm working on my Genesis study, and I've been talking a little bit about trying to get my YouTube channel up and going, and I'm just basically using my laptop right now. I hope the audio and the video is good. But my friend, writer John L. Monk sent me not the little tripod thing, but this camera, and this is going to help doing some new videos and all that. I still am looking for some kind of used Android phone or some phone that has enough speed in it that I can do the editing on the phone, because that's easier to do. These computers that I have are old and they're really, really slow. But I really want to thank John L. Monk for sending that camera. He's got a good eye for stuff, and I've been messing around with it a little bit. I tried to get it where I could actually do this Facebook Live with that as the camera, but I haven't gotten that far yet. I haven't figured out how to do that. And then I think last time I did the Facebook Live with my phone as the camera, and I think it came out a little bit better. Hey, if y'all are out there, tell me what the video is like. What I'm trying to do with is I got these platforms, Twitter, which has their live feed video, and that's what Scott Adams uses for his kind of daily morning 1 hour show. And I like that because, like here, you can take that and put it on YouTube. But I don't really have a very big Twitter following, and I'm probably shadow banned on Twitter because I don't like get any interaction. I think I've got maybe 1,700 or 2,000 followers on Twitter, but I don't ever hear from anybody. So if you follow me on Twitter, I think it's at mbunker. If you follow me on Twitter, you can tell me whether you ever see any of my posts, because I think I see like 1 or 2 people ever comment, but most of the time I just feel like nobody's seeing it. And I'm looking for a pen. I don't know if this one's going to work or not. That's my, and it's going to be backwards. I should have wrote it backwards. All right, at mbunker, that's my Twitter. But so they have this Periscope thing. All right, Susan, start a business. Pat, survivalists use scare tactics instead of teaching life skills like back in the old past. Yeah, that's exactly right. You're exactly right. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So, and I think I might have. So Periscope, which is part of Twitter, is a live format, and you can do live videos, and then you can take those videos and you can put them on YouTube as a YouTube part of a YouTube channel. But Facebook does that too. I actually have more interaction with people on Facebook. And then the third way is to just do it on YouTube. And you guys can tell me what you think is the best way. I may do some combination of the three. And then I also have this, which is my main Facebook wall. And then I have a page, which is kind of my official writer authorly page. And then I have the Christian group, and I can do live videos in there too. But most of those people are probably not going to want to sit here and listen to me talk about 10-star. So it's very confusing how I should do this. And I'm just trying to get the technology up to where once I make a decision and I dive in, whether I want to do a show once, 2, 3 times a week, or, Scott Adams does one every day. It's 30 minutes to an hour every day. And I actually have gotten to where I get up and get some stuff done and then put him on it. I think he comes on at 9 a.m. my time. I don't agree with everything he says. Scott Adams is the guy who writes the Dilbert cartoons. I guess they're called comics, Dilbert comics. Oh yeah, I'm going to do TikTok. Artie, go drown in a fire. But he's a very logical person, and he uses reason, which is something that I appreciate. And so I love it when he goes through on today's show. He went through all of the different racist claims against Trump and examined each one individually. That was kind of the reason for him doing the talk. But the meat of the talk was that there are 3 kinds of people, and you have your artist types, which is artists, musicians, writers, creatives, and they, and I'm not trying to steal his show, but I'm just explaining in case you want to go see it. They conflate. And I don't know if you can read this because it may be backwards on your screen. They conflate, which by nature, artistic types they think there's no coincidence because they're used to taking different elements and creating a narrative. Whether or not any of those individual elements stand up or not is not important. As we mentioned in the 10-star, they're telling a narrative. And so if you already assume that all plain people are wicked, and you already assume that they're all liars and they're hypocrites because you personally don't believe what it is they believe, and so you project that disbelief on them, then they must be doing it for another reason. So they must be doing it for wicked reasons that are wicked to you. And so then as you write, everything validates that point. And this is called conflation. And so there are 3 types of people that Scott Adams talks about. You have your artistic types, which conflate, which take a ton of information, whether any of it individually is valid or not, and they create a narrative that could be completely untrue. Then you have your kind of technical people who are more doctors, engineers, mathematicians. And I think the word he uses, I'm not going to remember it. I got a horrible memory. But they actually look at, they are capable because of the scientific method of turning everything off and saying, okay, I'm not going to look at all of the stuff about Trump or about Hillary or whatever, but there's this one accusation. And I did this on the podcast with Artie and with Forbes, and they are completely incapable of doing anything like that, which is, let's just start at one thing and let's look, is this one thing true? But since they already are completely predisposed to whatever they watch, whether it's CNN or MSNBC, they're not capable of saying, okay, this one thing is not true. It's a hoax. It didn't happen. But people who are more mathematically minded, then they could take each one of those things, and if you look at each one of those things, you can see how many of them fall apart because you're capable of just looking at that one thing. And I forget what the word he used for that. If somebody watched it, they can. And so you had conflate. I may have missed the third one too. The third one is people that just have an agenda. So they are neither one side or the other. They start with the agenda, and then they find the data that supports whatever the agenda is. And so those people are news people, people who are propagandists. And so almost every person in the media, whether it's the left or the right, they start off with, this is the thing that I'm going to believe. And so this makes it very difficult. Very rarely do you find a logical, reasonable person in any of the categories than the second one. And so you won't find moderates or people who are this way on one issue and this way on another issue in the conflation side or in the agenda-driven side. You just never will. They're always going to be extremists because they already have their thought process. And so explanation of it, because I'm not stealing this. This is he's just pointing out something that's obvious if you think about it. But go to Scott Adams' Twitter feed or his YouTube, and you can find today's video. I think it was called Sheeple Opinions or something like that. And he does that every day. So every day he takes whatever in the news. And there's things that I completely disagree with him on because he just looks at things differently. And then and there's things that I agree with him a lot on. But the difference is being able to hear somebody and to listen to their argument for that one thing and go, okay, I was wrong about that, or I can see where you could make that argument or whatever. And so I thought that was pretty valuable. And so I'd like to do something like that. Only maybe not on such a big political level. To talk about theological issues or religious issues, the concept of whether there is a God, what that God is like. I like to talk about, cultural things. And anyways, Pat was talking about survivalists use scare tactics instead of teaching life skills. That's really true, and it's not just a survivalist. A lot of preppers and use those things rather than develop a philosophy where certain skills are valuable, and people should learn that those skills are valuable, and bringing people through that door where they say, okay, it would be good to be able to do these things or to live my life at a certain level of civilization if I didn't have access. The problem with that idea, which is what I try to do, which is try to teach people a philosophy of preparedness or survival that's just wise, is that there has to be a base level of historical understanding. In other words, the hearer has to consider the possibility that the highly technical and technological dependent system that we operate under has flaws and hasn't been around that long. In other words, it's fairly new. Hey, y'all, let me know if this video is all right. What I'm looking at is a little bit jumpy, or if you can hear me. But so when I tell people, okay, what happens if we have a systemic power failure that doesn't go away in 2 to 3 days? Doesn't compute. They can't conceive of, because they don't understand that we've only had readily available power for 60 or 70 years. They don't have a conception of what it would be like or how dependent they are on those systems. Just-in-time food supply, 3 days of food, which is a lie. In the food supply, going to the stores, etc. The systems aren't questioned. They're not questionable because they don't have the foundation to be able to question those things. Those things take some historical understanding, the collapse of civilizations, the very advanced level of previous civilizations that then reverted back hundreds and hundreds of years in technology because of that collapse. The fact that with several of the possible systems of or collapse of systems like solar flare could actually be not permanent as far as a technological necessity, but they could become permanent because of the result of those things and the upheaval that comes from them. And so, like I said, there's one way to bring people in that door, and that is teaching them wisdom of why it would be good. Not saying you have to live off grid or that you have to live as a survivalist, but just think about, have the ability to think about why those things might be a good idea. The second way to bring people into that, and if you're making money on it, which means that your main motivation is to sell people things, then you use fear, or you can use uncertainty. Those things are going to happen naturally. Now, fear is embedded in the modern system. Our modern system works on fear because that's how you motivate people. You motivate people through uncertainty, and governments operate on the mitigation of panic, but at the same time, they also manage fear. They don't ever want you completely comfortable because then they can't move you to the left or the right. They want you to be in fear, but they don't want you to panic. So there's a balancing act in how governments deal with people. And so, hold on. I'm trying to. All right. And so, so what they, people that have a financial interest or some other interest, joining a group or whatever, will use fear to kind of force people into thinking that something is imminent, even if it is or isn't. And the problem with that is that when that fear is, when some information contrary to that is introduced, or that fear is allayed, then those people fall out, and they no longer see the value in that type of preparedness lifestyle. Now, as a people, whether you want to consider yourself a nation or a culture or whatever, we ought to be preparedness minded. In fact, that should be one of the purposes of government, if not to assist communities in becoming sustainable and becoming survivable without massive infrastructure. They're not in that business, so they're never going to do that. But that should be one of the purposes of government. And the other is to disseminate information on threats and also on way. And government used to do this. You can find a lot of government documents from the 40s and the 50s, PDF files, where they show you how to make a wood gasifier generator in case. And a lot of people have downloaded a lot of these PDFs from the 40s and 50s that were put out by government onto hard drives and things that they can access, or they've printed them out into books. But this was a common thing pre and post World War II, where the government actually put out information. Don here said, here we have off-grid power and satellite dish. Combine that with thunderstorms, and we sometimes get broken video. Yeah, but this is all coming through my life. Pardon me. I've had allergies that have developed into a little bit of upper respiratory pardon me, cough. And sometimes I start coughing, and sometimes I'm fine. Anyways, so that's another way to bring people into that room, and it's probably not as valuable. Now, where these things intersect is that quite often, by telling people the truth about the society and the culture, telling them the truth about the dependency and the nature of our system, so that they are vulnerable to interference and vulnerable to collapse, that itself, just the facts, can bring fear. And it should be any good teacher should be in the practice of trying to say, okay, right behavior is what mitigates fear, not the purchase of endless amount of goods and services, solar panels, even guns or whatever. Those things ought not be the root of our allaying of fear, but wisdom and understanding and knowledge, spiritual truths should be what helps us allay fear. And so well, you can tell when somebody's operating out of a fear base. There it goes. You have the first stages of dysentery. Well, I got off the Oregon Trail a long time ago, so if it happens, it happens. But Bob Crosley was here, and he should have been here 20 minutes ago when I was talking about the ways that people assimilate information or understand information. Go back, Bob Crosley, and watch the beginning of the video, the first half hour. I don't know how long this thing has been going. About half hour. But watch the whole thing, Bob. It would have been. I think you would have liked it. Anyways, so the question or the comment is that survivalists and preppers and stuff use fear to motivate people, and yes, they do, especially if they have a financial motive. That doesn't mean that anybody selling anything is operating or working on your fear, but the people that are working on your fear are usually doing it for a financial reason. You also have to ask yourself, as I just mentioned, why does something cause fear in you? And fear is usually a sign. Fear is a fear of loss. Loss is the actual basis of fear. So you're usually not afraid if you have nothing to lose. Fear is not really the way that you identify that emotion or that response. If you have nothing to lose, you're not really afraid. You may be resigned, you may be depressed or whatever it is, but it's usually not fear. Fear is based on the fear of loss. And so identifying what it is that you are afraid of losing is the beginning of wisdom in that arena. So if you are afraid that we're going to have a foreign invasion, or if you're afraid we're going to have a solar flare, or if you're afraid we're going to have a infrastructure attack, a terrorist attack that takes down our infrastructure, all of things that could happen, then you ask yourself, what is it that I fear losing if that happened? That helps you just understand your own motivation, why it is you think the way that you think. Most people operate with a fear of losing the status quo, which is comfort and affluence. And so their fear of losing those things. And the second thing is the fear of a type of stability. So they don't know what threats are out there, or they don't know what threats they ought to be afraid of. And so fear, because it is a fear of loss, once you understand what the loss is, then you can begin to study those individual things and find out if those things are valid, if they are logically stand that this is something that is likely to happen or could happen. And then you can ask yourself, what is it? What's the basic infrastructure of why this thing could happen? So let's say your fear is that, political instability could lead to civil war or could lead to violence in the streets. So you start off, what is your fear? Fear is always fear of loss. That's what it starts with. What is it you fear losing? Perhaps you fear losing the ability to move, travel, access resources, school, hospitals. You fear death. You fear violence. You fear that type of instability that intersects or stops the production, which is a very real fear. What happens if production stops because people are not capable of producing? This happened in Europe during the 100 years or so when armies were crisscrossing Europe, and they would come in and just take crops and leave people with nothing, or they would conscript the males into the army. Then what happens is people stop producing. there's no motivation to produce. This is a very real fear that causes people some type of anxiety. And so then you can start asking yourself, how do I mitigate that type of fear? And it's more of a rational response than it is just saying, two irrational responses to a fear or a understanding of current events. One of them is the kind of ceteris paribus fallacy or confirmation bias that says nothing bad can happen to me because I'm a good person and I'm a Christian and God loves me, and all of you make your list, whatever it is. You're not a Christian, but you're smart. Nothing, this confirmation bias that just says whatever stability is necessary for me to be special in my own eyes and to not suffer harm is what's going to happen. That's the way it's been my whole life. I've never missed a meal, so that's what's going to happen. That's an insane concept, and most people operate out of that idea, whether they vocalize it or not. They do think of themselves as special. They do see themselves as somehow immune to the historical forces that have affected thousands and millions of other people, billions of other people. And then the other extreme of insanity is to think that you can, by using brute force, money, application of sources, you can mitigate or eliminate all risk. Both of those things are insane and are not valid responses to cultural, social, or economic interruption. So at some point you have to be able to look at things and most people go, I don't want to think about it. I'm just going to go through my life. If something happens, I'll deal with it when it happens. Again, this is not a logical or reasonable mindset, because not only does it cast responsibility for you and your family on other people, but it denies what it is that you ought to be doing to benefit your family and people around you. So you're not going to be prepared to stabilize your family or the people around you because you really don't care, because you're a selfish person. That type of selfishness is endemic in our culture today. And to me, it's not a reasonable way to operate. Just as unreasonable as thinking that by the procurement of massive amounts of guns or food or beans or bullets or whatever it is, that somehow you're going to create a stable infrastructure just around yourself and that nothing bad can happen to you. Then the sane philosophy is to, using logic and reason, examine everything that can affect you and your family, the culture, the society, threats, real or imagined, and drill down on those and see how real is this? What is my motivation here? What is my fear? What is it I fear losing? What is the likelihood of this happening? Seek competing information from news sources that you don't already agree with, and then make a determination of how real or imagined these threats are. Analyze the threats and then say, okay, what would be a benevolent and wise way to operate under this new information. So to me, having love for your neighbor, which includes your family members and your actual neighbors, is to have the mental capacity, the knowledge, and the skills to be able to help people in times of uncertainty or disaster or whatever it is, to be a positive anchor so that you can love your neighbor. Most people don't love their neighbors, especially people who profess to be Christians. They really don't. And that's a practical view based on their worldview and what they actually do. They may send money to missions. They may send money to Red Cross or whatever it is. Truly loving your neighbor involves a whole lot of other things. I mentioned a week or two ago the Christian view of labor, the Christian view of things like politics and all that. most people that confess to be Christians don't love their neighbors, because they don't look at them and say, okay, what's my obligation to this person, whether it's an employee, an employer, an actual neighbor, someone who lives near them. Our mental ability to stand in a crisis and to have practical knowledge, first aid, food procurement, what things in your environment are edible. These aren't things that are going to cause you to go to college to learn them. It may take you a short amount of time to learn just in your neighborhood what edibles are out there that you could help people if there's a 3-day interruption in services or something like a hurricane, how to start a fire, what things not to do. These things are all, YouTube has been a great benefit, although there's a lot of junk on there. YouTube's been a great benefit to the world as far as that goes, where you can learn, sit down and watch 100 videos on starting fires without, if you don't have a lighter, if you don't have gasoline, whatever it is. So I probably rambled way too long on that. If anybody has any other questions you want to get to, type them into the comment section. We don't have to talk about survival or preparedness. You missed a really, if you just tuned in later, you missed a really good discussion on the 3 types of people. And I got it from Scott Adams, video show from this morning. It was really good. I highly recommend it. He does a live show every morning at about 9 o'clock. And even if you disagree with whatever, I haven't really figured out what his politics are. I know that he tends to like Trump now, but I think he voted for Obama. He has the ability to look at individual issues and say, okay, this is what I think about this issue. And you'll find yourself on the left or the right of him. You agree with him or disagree with him, but what you can't say is that he doesn't think about them. And that's what I hope we all are and should be. Having the ability to defend what it is you believe is a highly valuable to not just you, but to the society around you, anybody that interacts with you. All right, so if you have questions, type them in. If not, I'm going to drink coffee and hang out here till I'm pretty sure that no one cares anymore. So and type in your questions. I'm just talking while I'm waiting. So my idea is I would like to do this show once, maybe twice a week, maybe more eventually, maybe up to 1 hour. And I did it on Sunday like 2 weeks ago. And then I was at my parents' house last weekend, so I wasn't able to do it on Sunday. And I probably will do one tomorrow, which I'll actually call Plainsplaining. If you have anything you want me to talk about tomorrow, you can put it in the comments here on this video, or you can private message them to me or whatever. So we'll see how that works out. Hopefully we'll figure out what the best way to do this is, and where more people can interact, and we can talk about more important things and things that help people learn how to think, which I think is something that's really needful. So I'm going to wait here for about a minute. If you have a question or a topic, fire away. I got about 13 minutes we could use if somebody had a question. This is not mesquite coffee. This is cheap, sure fine coffee, but French roast. I don't really drink a lot of the mesquite coffee because it's too valuable. I'm watching the trail of sheep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sheep are going by my window right now. All right, Scott Glenn. I would agree with your list of reasons for fear. Would add that the fall of man is the prime cause. I agree with you completely. Absolutely. Uncertainty as to one's place in the universe, particularly in one's eternal address, even if you think that you're an atheist and that you're just going to cease to exist, and that somehow the soul, which has neither weight, vector, direction, or anything, just ceases to exist. If you believe that, you may convince yourself you believe that, but most likely the root of a lot of fear is that uncertainty of the existence or the meaning of the spiritual world That's why there's so many false religions and false takes on it out there. Agree with that? You're welcome, John Henry. Anybody else that's out there, thank you all for tuning in. I might be back tomorrow right around 11 o'clock, and we'll maybe do a plainsplaining show. If you have anything you want to talk about, we'll talk about it then. Just put it in the comment section. Thank y'all. Talk to you later.